Tom said, this isn't really a crystal ball because I don't own a very good crystal ball. I can look ahead and I will make comments about things that are out there and concerns that we have in terms of upcoming policies and so forth and issues that we're facing the city. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through here. But a lot of what I'm going to present here is really where we are and things that are growing and developing, and then you guys can ask me the questions about what if, and I'll be able to try to answer it, but I don't want to get too far out in front of my headlights on this. As you know, and you probably see pretty frequently, College Station gets a lot of recognition from a lot of different organizations, fast growing, best community for this, best community for that, number 24, best cities to live in America, Heartland Forward says most dynamic metros, number 15, safest cities in America, and so forth. There's a lot of organizations out there that kind of highlight these recognitions, and we've got a whole list of those. But College Station is nationally and even internationally known because Texas A&M is internationally known. And if you talk about Texas A&M to somebody around the world that's in higher education, they will know about the university and they will know College Station is the home, which is our tagline, and we're really proud of that. We're at 128,000 people, probably 129,000 today, but that's the latest number. 88% growth. I think anybody who drives around the community understands that we are a growing community, and frankly, as the home of Texas A&M, which is also growing, even though they claim they're in a little bit of a pause. I've heard that story about every 10 years for the last 45 or 50 years here. Oh, we're going to slow down in captive growth. And then about a year or two later, well, the cap's gone, and General Ramirez spoke to us at our last council meeting on Monday night, talking about student housing, and he said A&M is going to continue to grow. So we face that, we deal with that, we recognize it. We are the home of Texas A&M, so we have to plan for the impacts of all of that. I want to talk about different things as I go through here. Policy, budget, which is really important because that really indicates what our priorities are, is where we're putting our money, right? And facilities, some of the things you see being built, infrastructure, and so forth. If you take a look at residential growth, I think you will recognize many of those, but these are the ones that are growing currently around the edges of the city where most of the new homes are being built. I want to just take this as an opportunity to talk about a major set of policies that are facing the city. One is cost of housing, and the cost of housing is driven by the demand and the cost of land. If you look at City College Station, we're about 53 square miles. State legislature has basically said to cities, you're not going to be able to annex as you used to do. You're going to have to get the people who are being annexed to vote. If that were the case, the whole area around Welborn would not be in the city. It'd be out in the county and dealing with county building and county regulations and so forth. But we aren't going to be growing much in terms of land, and that means we're going to be growing more densely, and we're growing up, and there will be developments in the county. Indian Lakes, for example, will continue to grow and develop. The old racetrack, Southern Point, that's actually a mud district, and it's growing very fast, but it's not in the city. We have an agreement with them that we will annex them, and they will not have any choice because we set up a development agreement with the mud district when we authorized that to be developed. So they are paying an extra $1 tax rate, whereas the city citizens living in the city are paying, what, 53 cents? They're paying $1 per 100 in that Southern Point development, and that's to pay off all the infrastructure. When they get about 80% of that done and it's pretty well paid off, the infrastructure, the bond indebtedness they've got, we will then be annexing them, and that'll be probably 10 or 15 years down the road. So that's an example of an area that's kind of in transition, but there aren't many of those other opportunities out there, so we would expect to see our policy changing or evolving to encourage more dense development, and you see it on the ground already. One of the other things that's related to housing and housing impact is the 50,000 or so students that live off campus in the city of College Station. And I think most of you that are involved in homeowner associations or residential neighborhoods in College Station, you see that impact of rental house development. We've done a lot in the last 2 years to change how we approach that whole problem. Former council member Brick, when she and I were on council together, she was a strong advocate for us to come up with some kind of a new zoning area that would attract the investors and keep them from encroaching into what are traditionally thought of as single-family neighborhoods. I think when she and I were on council, we weren't smart enough to figure out how to get it done, but we finally have some staff members, the Director of Planning and Development Services, City Manager came along, and they came up with some really interesting and unique things. And so last year we rezoned a whole set of areas within 2 miles of the campus that were 80 to 90% rental already to something called middle housing. And that middle housing then affords the investors to come in and buy some of those duplexes and single family residences, townhomes, and other things that are in those areas and redevelop those areas. And they can redevelop them more densely. And in those areas, they'll be allowed to have more than 4 unrelated if they're under this new high occupancy overlay. So we've got some evolving policy changes that we've adopted in the last year or two to try to encourage investors to target areas of the city that aren't going to be in the traditional single-family neighborhoods that are zoned as suburban residential. And so we wanted to try to encourage them to move that way. And they have to still come to the city. They have to prove they got the parking spaces. They got to show they got the design that will accommodate more than 4 unrelated. And they got the parking spaces, and they're staying within all of the rules about impervious zone. They can't cover more than half the lot with impervious materials, because drainage is another big issue that we're facing as you get more dense. And you get more intense storms, you get more flood control problems. So anyway, there's a whole set of policy issues that we'll be facing down the road. And one more I will mention, regarding the expansion, the state legislature is now on the verge, I believe, of telling us that we really have no control over the extraterritorial jurisdiction. That 5-mile strip around the city that we used to be able to have some regulation in, not zoning and land use, but in terms of subdivision requirements and all of that. Now, individual properties can petition the city and remove themselves from the ETJ, and then they're on county regulations even though they're surrounded by the ETJ. So we got 6 cases we dealt with about a month ago, and we denied their request, but it doesn't really mean anything because the legislature says cities have no standing. There are court cases going on, that's why we denied it. We'll see how that evolves down the road, but I would expect the legislature is aiming to take away the whole ETJ from all cities because they really don't like cities, and they don't see that cities have a big economic engine and a purpose anymore for some reason. Now, legislatures won't say that in so many words, but they are driven by the development community to try to make it less expensive, cheaper, and better for people to develop land and build housing, and yet not meet the city's standards. So we've got a lot of issues in the whole housing area, and it's not all just where student rental is going to be. It's about where we're going to grow and how we're going to grow. So what you see in Northgate, and we'll show you a slide in a minute, that's an example of where some of the housing stuff is going. But this is just a highlight some of the developments in, and the Southern Point development, which is just outside, but sometime we'll be in the city. There's our permits, single family homes. We permitted 483 last year, $122 million. That's added to the tax rolls, that's good. And new addition to tax roll is always a good idea. It helps to spread the costs of our services. Multifamily homes, apartment complexes, there were 11 of those last year, and you can see the scale of them as well. That doesn't include some of the big ones that are being built today because they haven't been added to the tax rolls. So you see the high rise going up over in Northgate, and here, and you'll see some of those. Here's another small area planning. One of the things we do is look at aspects of the city where we think we should be encouraging redevelopment. And one of those is the northeast corridor. You're standing here, or you're looking right down University Drive to the east. That's the Embassy Suites on the left. Texas Avenue is right underneath you. That whole corner, that whole area is what we're calling Northeast Gateway redevelopment. We had the staff look at the infrastructure in that area, the streets, the condition of the properties in that area. And I think any of you can look at that corner there and identify properties that probably are not generating the tax revenue or really performing at a very high level. And so what we're trying to do is encourage private sector to work with the city to accumulate and buy up some of those properties and begin to reinvest in not the same scale as Northgate, but a little more urban development particularly on the east side of University Drive and along, on the east side of Texas Avenue and along University Drive and some of those underdeveloped areas. And it won't be like Northgate, but we're trying to encourage them to think productively. We've had some response from some investors. If you look at that Embassy Suites, that's owned by Mack Hike, the big auto dealership group in Houston. He just wanted to put a flag in the ground in College Station because he could see the growth. He had a property guy working for years to accumulate all of those little single-family home properties that were along along Jane and the two streets on either side. And they got most all of it except one corner and then over on the Cooner Street side. That takes a lot of effort, and the private investors got to really work hard to do it. But if you're right next door to the fastest growing, largest university in the United States, in the state of Texas, which is one of the fastest growing states, there are people that are attracted and want to invest here. So what our job is as a city is to examine areas, study the infrastructure and our regulations regarding development in that area, and work in partnership with the private sector to see how we might change the streets, what's got to be rebuilt, do we have to add new sewer lines, new water lines, how are we going to get that area into a more economic development activity. There's other policy issues that we'll talk about as I go on through this, but the housing thing is probably as big a problem as we have. On the budget side, how many people have ever looked at the city budget? Oh, we got one or two people that have actually studied it. It's online, cstx.gov. Go to departments and you go to the Department of Financial Services. The budget's located there, and they've got a citizens budget, which is a streamlined version of it that's really interesting to look at and see where some of our priorities are. Overall, we've got a 51.3% tax rate this year. There's another policy issue that's impacting us statewide is the constraint to 3.5% increase in the revenue from property taxes on the operations and maintenance side of our budget. So with inflation running 5 or 6%, and our sales tax this year maybe be up to 2% in growth, and we only got 3.5% increase in our property tax that's allowed to us, because we've lowered that tax rate each year the last 2 years. We'll probably have to lower it again, but as all of you know, your appraisals have gone up, although most folks in here, if they're homesteaded, hopefully your property tax is frozen, but the majority of the people in the city or rental properties are paying significantly higher taxes overall. But that cap is limiting our ability to add services. We're adding police officers every year, but we're coming up on we'll see it in a few minutes, on a really big hit when we have to staff the new fire station that's going to be built in the next 2 years. We need something like 24 full-time equivalents for the ambulance and the fire station for total for 3 shifts, plus the battalion chief. That's about $2.5 million of recurring costs every year. We don't have that kind of money that's laying around in our operating budget. So we're going to have to come up with it from somewhere, which means we have to squeeze other services because we can't raise the tax, we can't keep the tax rate where it is as long as appraisals keep going up. And if inflation is operating at 4 or 5%, we're really not going to be able to keep up. So you'll hear more about that, not this year, but probably next year when we really have to face a decision about hiring the first wave of those firemen. The overall budget's about $500 million. That includes all of our enterprise services, water, wastewater, and the sanitation department. Those are, and electric, those are all enterprises that are paid for by rates. So ratepayers are paying for all of that. The general revenue budget is $118 million, and out of all of that, we've got about $125 million scheduled this year for the real capital projects. We'll see a few of those from previous years. So of that $118 million, what do we got? The revenue coming in is about evenly split between property tax and sales tax. And we're fortunate, all of these restaurants and all of the retail stores we see opening in College Station, including places like Murdoch's that just opened, and Costco that opened a year or two ago, they're generating regional sales tax draw into College Station. So that's good because it's other people's money. And it's fortunate that we're able to have attractive locations for these kind of businesses to come in here so that the sales tax increase, we're actually slightly above where we were last year, but statewide sales taxes are flat, and many cities sales tax revenue is lower this year than was last year. I was reading about Conroe, down 4 or 5% from last year's sales tax revenue. Well, they got a real problem, and if we can't keep that sales tax number competitive, then property tax is going to have to pick up a good chunk of it. And there's some other funds that flow into that as well. I don't want to dwell on that, but there are utility transfer is an important part of our revenue. People are concerned about that because your electrical rates and water and wastewater are helping to underwrite the cost of the city, which we consider to be a legitimate return on the investment that the city makes in organizing and running these enterprises. So that's how we get a return on the investment. Here are some of the expenses. One of the things that maybe people don't recognize, 46% of that $118 million, public safety. Almost half of what we spend for all of our general revenue expenses is police and fire. And every year we grow, we have to add police, we have to add firemen. So that is a major impact, and then you can see from there Parks and Recreation and so forth. For my Parks and Recreation friends, I will say, back there in the back row, when I first got on Parks Board and Steve Beachy was the chairman of the Parks Board, the largest department in the budget was Parks and Recreation. Not police and fire were actually smaller percentage. Police, separately from fire, were two departments were a smaller percentage than the expenditures on the parks in the city of College Station. Steve Beachy is a masterful public bureaucrat, I would guess you'd say. And he knew, he always had plans. He always had things planned. He knew what was needed. And he was there first and foremost asking for any revenue that was available. Well, obviously that couldn't be sustained in the long run, but public safety is a critical thing. Any questions, anything I've said so far? You want to explore something? Yes, sir.
Just curious about the information technology portion. What does that cover?
Information technology portion, that where are we at here? Yeah, 7%. We have across the city an extensive intranet that all of the city employees use. We have all of our information management in the city that is vital to keep the city operating because we're digital, like most modern organizations are. Cybersecurity has been the big emphasis in that department for the last 5 years. Protecting that data so that it does not get compromised is a big part of the cost of running IT these days. So it's a substantial effort in our IT department. Everybody's got laptops. All the police cars got laptops in them. Supporting all of those, replacing them on a regular basis, because those things get 5, 7 years old, and particularly the ones in the vehicles that get vibrated, and there's a lot of repair work that has to be done on them even when they're relatively new. So we've actually got a shorter time horizon on replacement for the police vehicles than we do for other staff that have laptops that are working in other departments across the city. So that's really where it's at. Cybersecurity is the word of the day, and every year we get asked for some additional funding to add some more software or another individual in that department to manage and protect us from the loss of any of that information, which would really, if the information is destroyed, you read about in the paper all of the people that have been targeted, all the organizations have been targeted, they've lost information. Ransomware comes along, and then you can't operate the city. So you got to have all of those protections in place. What is this? This is sales tax revenue. So this shows you where the development of sales tax revenues. As I said, we're in pretty good shape on that, and frankly, that's an area that the city continues to work on in terms of attracting retail businesses of one kind or another to fill gaps, not only in the properties in town, the retail properties, but also to fill the empty stores, so to speak. For example, the development of the old Albertsons on University Drive. I think you've seen that. REI is a big, well-known retailer coming in there. A lot of work has to be done to attract the investors to invest in that property, and then they attract the retailers that they are able to bring in here. We got to keep the sales tax moving up if we're going to keep a lid on property taxes. Of course, you all know about the new tourism events coming up this summer, like having 2 more football games. Yes, people will be inconvenienced that weekend, just like you are on football weekends. You don't go around the campus unless you're going to the event. But there's a lot of people that are interested in these events, and a lot of people that come from outside of the city spend money here. Hotel revenue is substantially increased from the COVID days when they were really depressed. So these are tourism events. Thank you to A&M's athletic department for making an effort to take their big investment in Kyle Field and spreading that over more events in a year. Hotel occupancy taxes, well, this shows you see this was much more evident in terms of increase and decrease than our sales tax. The hotel occupancy tax revenues come to the city. They can be invested in an array of 10 different things according to state legislature, and they are actually partially invested in our park system, and we're doing a lot of our tourism development budget. It's about $2.5 million for the tourism department and the economic development department to help fund their operations because they are bringing more people to town. And we had those hotels that were really suffering during COVID. Not only did we lose the hotel tax, we lost sales tax, but every one of those hotels went to the appraisal district and said, take a look at our income stream. We're only worth half of what you said we were worth. We were $10 million on your tax roll 2 years ago. We haven't got the income to support a $5 million appraisal. So the appraisal dropped on all of those properties as well. Well, that's coming back now, and that's good for our tax base. Let's take a look at some of the facilities around the city. You remember, and this is a good update for many of you that voted on our 22 bond election. The Thomas Park development is number 1. That was going to start with the reconstruction of the streets on both sides of it. However, now that we're going to be redoing Lincoln Street next year, we've decided to delay that because you're going to have traffic finding their way around Lincoln Street, because Lincoln Street's going to be torn up for about 18 months starting this summer. And so we're still working on that. We've got a development plan. After the streets are redone, we get the drainage fixed. Then there's a whole redevelopment of the park itself, not including a swimming pool. And I know that's a sensitive subject to folks who live on the east side, but that was put on a bond issue and was turned down. So we've got other interesting things in there. The pickleball folks showed up the other night. Anderson Park, do you remember, it's been a long time. I remember when I was involved in getting the soccer club organized. Anderson Park was ground zero, and we put fields out there, and the youth soccer club actually had to do the work on that. So that park on Anderson Street has been, I guess, underutilized, shall we say, for the last 10 years. It's an open field, so we've decided to put the pickleball courts over a bunch of them right there on that Anderson Park area, and that's well along in design. Lincoln Center, I saw a story on TV the other day about the upgrades that are being proposed for that. Bee Creek Central Park tennis court replacement and other things is underway. Central Park Operations Shop, if you walk that trail at Central Park out behind the world headquarters, you know there's an old facility there for operations. That's going to be taken down, and a new, much more efficient operation is going to be replacing that, much larger over in that area. Bachman Park, Bachman Little League and Senior League and soccer, I think saw Councilman Cunha here, Councilperson Cunha. We were on the architectural committee and looked at that a couple of months ago, the design of the replacement for those restrooms and central facilities that are deteriorating in each of those parks. So they're well along in the design as well. Fire station number 7, we just looked at that at our last architectural advisory committee and selected a final design that the staff had the staff pretty well had picked out what they wanted, and it's really replicating a fire station in another city that functionally works really well. From an architectural point of view, that's where we came in, talking about how does it look, how does it fit into the neighborhood and so forth. This will be on Greensbury Road, right near, I can't remember what the street is across the way, but it's, I think, William Phillips Parkway, I think, goes south. It goes into the Wyndham Ranch, not built yet, but it'll be facing Greensbury Road on the south side by the county development. It's right in the corner where the county takes over, actually. And that is pretty well along. And Rock Prairie East widening, you see what we're doing currently out there with Rock Prairie East. That's the first phase. The next phase is what was on the bond issue, and that is being examined and looked at to see how that could be designed to extend all the way to William Fitch. There's our fire station, number 7. That's sort of what it's going to look like. September 26th. So I think they're going to start that next year. And that's when we got to start adding the staffing to it, and that's where one of our big budget issues are. Here's another topic that we're wrestling with is the rec center. We've had on our agenda for years, and particularly last council, that City College Station really does need a centralized recreation center. Whether the city operates it, you hear about the YMCA. Well, YMCA would like to have a presence here. We are very much a statewide target for YMCA to do something in Bryan College Station, but this is not their building. This, of course, is just an example. This is not our building because we don't have it designed yet. We have a study underway. We'll hear about it later this summer. We'll hear results of how we should scale such a building if we decide to build it. We have resources set aside for paying for some of that. That comes from the COVID money and the IIJ Act money and all of that, ARPA money, I guess you call it. All of that has been accounted for and is now available without any deadlines. You hear about the county talking about deadlines as to when they are going to be able to spend that money or have to spend it. The medical examiner's office, for example, the county's going to build. they've got to spend that money by a certain date. The money that we have in reserves is our money, your money, and is available to invest in something like this recreation center or a potential conference, convention, event center. That is, even if you look at it, that's where my crystal ball gets cloudy. It's supposed to be a crystal ball study. The rec center is a lot clearer in my crystal ball that we are probably going to do something. I think the citizens have heard a lot about it. I think it's something that a growing city like College Station can definitely utilize. The event space, the conference center, convention center, there's a lot of different views of what it would be used for and how it might be developed and paid for. But most convention event centers that cities build, and cities have built a lot of them, you might just as well know up front you're going to subsidize it $1 million to $1.5 million a year. Depending on the size, it might be $2 million a year. That subsidy would have to come out of our hot tax, revenue from the hotel occupancy tax, and we're not clear, we haven't really decided if that's how we want to expend that kind of money to pay the subsidy on this kind of building. There are other opportunities coming along that are being offered to us, so we'll see how that goes. But the some kind of recreation center seems a little bit closer to becoming a reality, and we've had a bunch of public hearings, public open houses on that. Our consulting firm is going to help us think through scaling it, and then ultimately we'll have to decide on operations if we do it. Will the city's rec and parks department operate it, or will we outsource it to somebody like YMCA to be the operating partner and release it to them and let them be responsible for operations and covering the costs of operations. So we've got some interesting dynamics going on there. Our brand new director of Parks and Recreation, Kelsey Hayden, was a longtime director of a recreation center in the Braunfels that when she left, it was covering about 120% of its costs. So it was generating a net in the New Braunfels city area. Whether our consultants think we can do that here is another question. So that's yet to be determined, but you'll be hearing about it. Let's take a look at some of the infrastructure things. Everybody knows where the Lick Creek treatment plant is. How many people have ever been there to see any of it? 2 or 3 people have actually seen it. We got a chance to tour it when we cut the ribbon last summer. The single most expensive piece of infrastructure of any kind, building that we've ever built, expenditure, is that for the city of College Station. It's like $41 million, I think the number was, to build that out. And we started that about 5 years ago, and they started funding it, building it into the rate schedule for wastewater. So we're able to pay that off. If you were to try to duplicate that today, they tell me it cost $80 million. The city of Bryan is planning to build a new wastewater treatment plant over on a creek beyond Highway 30 that's going to go into the Navasota. $100 million they're going to have to expend to build that. But they got so much growth on the east side of Bryan, they've got to have wastewater treatment on the east side. Matter of fact, City of College Station is actually handling wastewater treatment in the city of Bryan, new developments along Highway 30, under a joint agreement that we have with Bryan. They're handling some of ours over along Turkey Creek Road because they've got treatment plants on the Brazos River side, which we don't have and don't plan to build. So that's a really, you know, it's behind the scenes. You don't think much about it, and nobody needs to go back in there. It's way back in the corner of the city, way back in the woods, but it is a magnificent operation. If you listen to the people that run it, and they talk about the technologies involved, it's really, really advanced. A business center, people are always concerned with the city buying land. What are you doing buying land? Why are you investing in property? You shouldn't be doing that. Let the private sector do that. Way back when, my predecessors, about 30 years ago, whenever it was, when they negotiated the whole Pebble Creek area and brought it into the city, they traded out and got the College Station Business Park located on the front side of that. The last pieces that were available, started with the FedEx Express. How many people been out there? Some of you delivered packages out there, you know that. So that was the first piece. What was left when I got, I guess it was before I became mayor, we sold that to FedEx. Then we had under contract items 3 and 4, lots 3 and 4. We just closed on that Monday, and a check was delivered to our bank account for $3.2 million. So we sell land. We don't just buy land, we sell land. But that land has been set aside to bring businesses to town that add value, provide good jobs for people that aren't simply going to be rooftops. You've got to have places in the city where businesses that will employ people that live in the city can grow and develop. Behind that, you know, Stata is back in there, a really interesting statistical software company. They've been there for a long time, moved here from California. They bought a lot next to them, and they're about to break ground on that. So we got 3 and 4, we got the cash in the bank. We just not under negotiation, we've signed a contract with a 180-day due diligence period for lots 1 and 2, and that'll be about a similar amount of money. And that's going to be an animal health biotechnology kind of business that's already here, and it's out in the Aggieland Business Park in lease space, but they're growing so fast that they need to develop here, and they want to be in College Station, and so they negotiated to get places 1 and 2. So we've basically sold all of the College Station Business Park, and we're getting, you know, we're selling land. And my point is, we're selling things as well as buying things, but strategically, the city is in the best position to hold land for 20, 30 years while growth develops, and then you get the industrial demand. And the kind of industries we have coming in are pretty compatible. Statistical software, the lot 3 and 4 is going to be the Houghton organization. They have a office and distribution center for Trane air conditioning and heating systems, so that's what's going to be in there. But they haven't broken ground on it, but they now own it, and we've got a contract for places 1 and 2. You're all familiar, if you live out on the east side of town, you got to get a little detour around Rock Prairie East. That's a piece of infrastructure that's being worked on down there beyond Scott and White Hospital. You've seen our new logos. I see some people smiling at this one. Some of the things that the city staff comes up with are really great ideas, and I compliment all of our city staffs. I'm not sure, this wasn't Parks and Recreation, but I think they're equally creative in developing these things. This is a good example, the I Love Aggieland sign out in front of City Hall with they put the graduation cap on it for this weekend. I saw streams of people stopping parking lot and walking out and getting photographs. It gets online, gets a lot of media coverage, and it helps to identify College Station as an interesting, kind of fun place to be. And this certainly adds to it. You know, we have converted the old fire station that had been really just used for storage and for facilities maintenance, and some offices for city offices for the last 20 years probably. After we got done with City Hall, this was part of the project to convert this to an event space, and it is getting a lot of use for non-city organizations. $2,000 to rent that space, and if you're a nonprofit, city managers are responsible for having a nonprofit rate for organizations that have relationships with the city, that do things with the city that we want to support. We can offer it cheaper. But there's a lot of organizations on campus that are looking for a retreat space, convenient, close by. We are investing another $100,000 in sound baffling in there. If you've ever been in there, you know it's concrete floors and metal ceilings and a lot of hard surfaces. So we've got to manage the sound. Now here is going to be an interesting experience for all of us. This is 2818. Now this is a TxDOT project and not a city project, but it does allow us to connect Penn Berthy, Jones Butler underneath this 2818 and connect with Holloman South without ever having to stop. And so that's going to be a big plus, because that Holloman 2818 intersection has been terrible for 10 years, 20 years. So that's going to be improvement, but the whole system is going to be what they call R cuts, or I call Michigan left turns. So you don't go, if you're on South Holloman heading south, you don't go directly to the other side. You turn right, you go down, do a U-turn, come back, and then you go down Holloman. And it's all traffic light controlled, so it's kind of like the diverging diamond thing out by the airport. Once you get into that intersection, you just flow right through because the lights are all timed. Now, that's going to be an interesting adjustment for many of us, including me. They are already putting the poles up out there, and that should be done. Fred Fisher asked me about that earlier. I'm guessing the end of the year, was supposed to be done the end of last July. So they're a year behind, basically. But that's construction for you. Bush-Welborn Crossing will probably start in 27, I believe. They've got the money for it. That's going to be a really exotic intersection. But when it's done, it'll allow the Welborn Road traffic to just go continuous right through there on the surface at the level of the railroad tracks and not have to stop. But if you want to get on and off of George Bush, you go down gradually 35 feet below grade, where all the traffic lights will be to turn left, turn right, or whatever you want to do. And then halfway in between it, you'll see those brown tan things. Those are the pedestrian paths. So pedestrians and bicycles can travel right through there and never interact with any of the traffic. So there's no crosswalks or anything. They'll be about 15 feet above, 15 feet below, but halfway between the surface grade and the 35-foot deep hole. That has to be done in phases according to university to accommodate football season. So after one of those football seasons, they will shut that intersection, they'll shut some of that intersection down, they'll build those two through lanes, north and south, get that done in 9 months, open that up, and then they'll start excavating to do the other intersection, but they'll keep the Welborn traffic moving during football games. So that's seems to be a pretty important thing for Kyle Field. Anyway, that's another big project. That's another TxDOT project, $100 million. Oh, yeah, just a little bit of statistics, just backing that up. You see the number of people, the number of trains, how many people work here. Some people do, this is an interesting statement. This is the 4th largest downtown in the state of Texas. College Station, the city, is not the 4th largest city, is it? We're probably 10th or 12th or something like that. But do you think of the downtown, meaning all of those people that work and study on campus every day, they're inside of those 4 roads, Welborn, Texas, University, George Bush, and if you want to, you can talk about 2818. That is density for that population of people employed every day makes this the 4th largest downtown according to TTI, which explains what the congestion issues are right around campus as you drive around there, and the concerns about pedestrian safety and bicycles interacting with cars and so forth. This is pictures of some of the things being developed in the North Gate area. That upper left, I believe, is the one on Welborn Road that's just about done. The one on the lower left, I believe, is pretty close to being completed. The one on the upper right is the latest rendering of what's going in at the corner of University and Welborn Road, and what used to be a food truck court, and right next to Chimneys and over to Church Street. The street address is actually 100 Church Street because that's where the main entrance is going to be. And if you've been on Church Street or First Street lately, you know they've got half of it blocked off and it's only one way while they do the construction on this. That's a $100 million building. It'll be on the tax rolls in 2 years. There's 2 or 3 more in Northgate that are well along in the design and permitting, where they've got the big enough footprint to build these kinds of student housing. Now, these are rent by the bedroom student housing, which is what seems to be the building model for students currently, particularly that close to campus, which is beautiful for us. Not only does it add a lot to the tax rolls, but it keeps people off the street driving from South College Station or Bryan into the campus and parking. They just get on their bicycles and ride across University Drive. And of course, that's another problem we got is the pedestrian safety, and we're working on with TxDOT and the university. And we've actually talked to Chairman McCall and our congressman in Washington about helping to fund a design for either overpasses or underpasses right there at Northgate, probably near the post office where there's a green space, and then it'll come up somewhere in the inner part of Northgate. Again, before my time, maybe even before Councilmember Brick's time, the city put a lot of money into water and wastewater infrastructure in that area. So we've got capacity to handle these high rises. What we don't have is the connection from that area for long-term development behind Century Square and down through what was considered to be Rosemary, but now going to be Chimney Hill, because we've negotiated with City of Bryan not to run it by gravity through the Beverly Estates area. We decided that we would do up Cooner Street, which we already did, but we got to then go down Chimney Hill Drive and go back down to Burton Creek to run along Burton Creek and connect with the sewer trunk line we already have there. So we do have to connect a very expensive, probably $20 million sewer line in there not to handle the next 5 years, but anything beyond that, particularly as Century Square grows. And there, they are already in phase 2. And Century Square is also going to be the location for the new Tiger Woods, what do you call it, the putt-putt golf. It's some kind of exotic golf kind of thing that he's going to have over there, which is on the backside of Century Square. Anyway, those are some of the Northgate developments. University Drive corridor, we mentioned that earlier. The Drury Hotel is just being closed in over there at Chimney Hill. And then Plucker's Wing Bar is going to have pickleball. So they've got a bar, restaurant, pickleball, patio, bar and grill kind of combination there. It's right, if you know where Grub Burger is, it's behind that, near one of those apartments back in there that David Scamardo's development around the fountain beyond that. So, and then of course the old Albertson building there, really interesting. Century Square, Pop Stroke, I talked about that, and the things that are going on in Century Square. Century Square during COVID looked a little iffy, particularly a lot of those accessory stores for women and that sort of thing. But I'll tell you, they're going gangbusters now. And if you look at all of those retail shops in there, high-end bootmaker in College Station. You're close to campus, you got 2 hotels there, you got all kinds of people coming into town for conferences, and you've got quite a few students that have got somebody's credit card that can afford that sort of stuff. That is, they're making that go. So I'm really happy to see Century Square come back so quickly from the COVID era when things were really looking tough. We're about to run out of time here, so I'm going to go a little bit faster through this. Out of Tower Point, a lot of things going at Tower Point. New steakhouse, I was out there about a month ago for the groundbreaking. That's right there in the corner behind IHOP, I think, is on the front end of that, in the Verizon store and that sort of thing. Very good location. Lots of other things happening out there in that area. Fujifilm put $300 million into their biotechnology building, additional building last year. That's developing out, although they have put a pause on some of their hiring because they're reorganizing their business internationally. So that's College Station, home of Texas A&M. I've got more slides, but I think I'd take a few questions now. I'm sure there's a few people glanced over a few things. Yes, ma'am, speak up.